Greetings, everyone. I'm Eric Hansen, and on behalf of everyone here at OTTX, I'm delighted to welcome you to this here edition of OTTX Videocast, The Buzz. It's December 11th. Happy holidays, everybody. We are pleased once again for the last time of calendar year 2024 to offer up our online stage to a few of streaming industry's top insiders to drop their version of the truth on us about what's going on, what it means, and what we should do about it in navigating the tumultuous waters of OTT streaming today. Before we turn things over to this episode's crew of Buzzketeers, I want to make sure to mention that you can find and subscribe to all episodes of The Buzz via podcast on Spotify. Search for OTT.x and be sure to follow us so you'll be notified about future episodes as well. It's a great way to spend that time in the car while you're sitting there in traffic in Los Angeles or you happen to be. We'll drop the Spotify link into the podcast chat so you'll be able to get to it easily. I'm looking forward to today's webinar. Presiding over our panoply of pontificators, we're excited to welcome our moderators, senior contributor at Forbes, David Bloom, along with Jonathon Barbato, Chief Executive Officer of Best Ever Channels, Brian Cullinane, the Chief Commercial Officer for VideoElephant, Kyle Kaczmarek, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of KDMG. Welcome, y'all, and happy holidays.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Hi, everybody. I am David Bloom. I am indeed a senior contributor to Forbes, but I also would be remiss if I did not mention a new venture. I, for a few years, was doing a weekly back and forth next text. I like to call it a text-based podcast with the editor of Next TV, which was the streaming-focused online site tied to broadcasting and cable and multi-channel news. Unfortunately, Future PLC decided to kill off Next TV and those two esteemed historic trade publications. So the editor of that publication, with whom I've done this Next Text for a couple of years, and I have launched into the world of entrepreneurial journalism with a newsletter called Next TMT that we still do our Next Texts. You can subscribe. I'll throw something in the chat if you want to check it out. Real quickly, I'd love to have anybody in this group in particular join us as we talk about what's going on. Some of the stuff that we'll get into today, we'll likely talk about in there as well. Let's start, though, real quickly with each of my fantastic surviving panelists. We lost a couple along the way. It does happen at holiday time. But I'd like each of my folks, we know who your names are, we know what your title is, but tell us what it is your company does. Jonathon, let's start with you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, David. Best Ever Channels. We have 5 channels in fast streaming, free ad-supported TV. We've got a couple subscription channels on Amazon. We also syndicate content in AVOD, video on demand. So we are a content production, supply, and monetization company.
Great. And Brian Cullinane from the sunny side of South Dublin, as it's often called. Tell us a little bit about VideoElephant.
Not so sunny here right now, David, and congrats on your new venture. So VideoElephant is a video content aggregation distribution platform. We've been around for about 12 years. So essentially what we do is we help the owners, creators, publishers of video content to get their content distributed in front of eyeballs and monetized. And that's everything from short form video on websites and apps, short form and longer form video in digital out of home and digital screens, to full-blown fast channels where we own and operate a number of them, as well as some managed third-party fast channels.
Great.
So all things video.
All things video. Elephantine video. Now, Kyle, KDMG sounds like an electronic band that Eric Hansen might be part of, but it in fact is your company. Tell us real quickly about KDMG.
Yeah, that would be awesome now, wouldn't it, if it was?
Yeah.
Not.
Guys been wearing giant mouse heads.
Awesome. I used to play. I used to play drums back in the day, so it's kind of maybe that subconsciously I was going that way.
break out the drum machine now. That's
we go. There we
like,
go.
very modern.
KDMG at the front, we're traditional distribution, all means bound to devise. We also do IP representation in brokering, so we represent IP projects for feature films and series content through all different stages of development to funding to hopefully getting carriage. We do a little M&A, mergers, acquisitions, and catalog side. And we got ourselves into the retail space a little bit with our first fast channel, Manifest TV, which was launched a little over a year and a half ago. We're rebranding, relaunching, coming just into the new year, which is exciting. And then we're going to start building out the actual platform application of that going into next year.
So you'll be manifesting a new service in the new year.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I know. Yeah. Running right into the fray. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Well, let's start. I'm pretty interested with what's going on over at Comcast. They said that this month that they're going to spin off most of their cable operations other than Bravo, which apparently provides a whole lot of programming for Peacock, and they can't really do that well, whereas everything else only contributes about 2% of the viewing on there. First of all, part of the reason they're doing it is to lighten the load on their share prices and all that. SpinCo, as they're artfully calling this potential spinoff company, they've intimated could be like a big acquirer of other cable services as media companies look to offload that declining asset. But post-election ratings have been, quote, catastrophic, according to Craig Moffett at Moffett-Nathanson, who follows the industry very closely. And he suggests the industry, the SpinCo won't have much of any leverage or power. They'll be stripped of their relationship with NBC News, potentially, et cetera, et cetera. And on top of that, Comcast had a big decline in broadband subscriptions, which sent their shares plummeting a few days ago, like 10%. So what are we to make of this? Is the future of cable a spun off sort of SpinCo plus thing? Or where's that all headed? Jonathon, any thoughts?
Yeah, is it the zombie apocalypse of cable networks is the question, right? What do you do when everything's changing? I think the good news maybe is that they're doing something, right? I mean, everything is changing, the deck chairs on the streaming Titanic sort of mentality, but it also does make sense if it's time to start aggregating content and channels into offerings that become more universal than every CTV having hundreds of different channels, then maybe this is a good way to do it. Comcast has been very smart and very big in the past, so maybe there's something we're not seeing. Maybe it's an iceberg under the surface. And it's interesting. I wouldn't have predicted it. It's a little bit of a diversion from how they usually do things. Definitely.
Right. I mean, Comcast is synonymous with the cable industry, right? And for them to ditch most of their cable channels is really something. They do have significant operations in Europe. I'm curious, Brian, from your catbird seat in South Dublin, what are you seeing about the wired business over there? It's mostly, I guess, satellite driven because of the difficulties of laying lines, I suppose. But where is this all heading in Europe?
Yeah, the situation here is very different to the US. Obviously, we don't have that same cable infrastructure. Obviously, Comcast owns Sky in Ireland, who would be a huge and very dominant and very progressive company. But like historically, all of the European countries have their free-to-air, national broadcasters who are still very, very large operators. So it's a very different mix, and I'm sure we'll get to it eventually. But the proliferation of like fast channels hasn't happened anything to the same extent over here as it has in the US. But you are starting to see the streamer, obviously the subscription streamers have done extraordinarily well over here, but you're starting to see people like Roku and Pluto and stuff make gains over here as well. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. It's interesting that FAST hasn't made any impact, but because of those over-the-air broadcasters, for instance, there's a less expectation of advertising to some extent, right? I mean, I think that's perhaps some of it. I mean, if you're watching the Beeb, you're definitely not seeing ads, but some of the competitors obviously do. That's fascinating to think about, and if there are opportunities there. I mean, I just think it's Roku looking for its executives looking for a chance to go to Italy and get some good food. I got a few suggestions, by the way, like behind me. Kyle, what's your thought on all this?
Well, actually, I was thinking back to, I think it was earlier in the year where on another panel, I made a comment that, should all watch Comcast because, that they're a sleeping giant and they've been quiet for a long time. And now I think it's right before the big battle. I think they're starting to line up the troops or position themselves for a big move. And some conversations we've had over there, they have been putting a lot of energy and emphasis into looking at FAST, looking at CTV, looking at other ways to really strengthen their offering. And I think it's safe to say that, yeah, they're trying to separate themselves from that cable label, which they are synonymous with. I think that was part of this whole move, is like, no, we're more than that. We're a service provider, tech, or all things. So they're going to put this over here, which frankly is the anchor anyway. So I think it was a smart move, and it's just like parting the way so that they can come forward with their next strong play. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the coming year.
Yeah, they've got that Zumo joint venture with Charter, which I think is interesting. But it's also interesting to contrast how the two biggest traditional cable service providers have approached the streaming world. Now, Comcast this week also cut a deal with Warner Brothers Discovery that sent Warner Brothers Discovery shares way up because they didn't hammer them on price. Everyone kind of expected that would happen, and it didn't quite happen. But TNT loses the NBA next year. They should, by all rights, probably have seen their fees drop some. But Charter has really incorporated all these services fully into the fading cable bundle. And I find that Charter approach very interesting. I don't know if the uptake on the streaming through the cable bundle has been notable. I've seen some stuff from Charter that suggests a lot of folks aren't signing up for Disney Plus, for instance, when they get cable. I mean, it's available to them if they're on the right tier. I mean, what is there is that thing, which was, including by me, sort of hailed as a groundbreaking, transformational, maybe saves cable, maybe gives streaming more legs. Is that going to be an approach that's going to matter to most consumers? Any thoughts, Jonathon?
Yeah, I think it's undeniable that the consumer field is shifting. It's the younger generation of video watchers don't consider television their primary source or their primary vehicle for watching, and so traditional bundling and even the idea of a network is shifting. AI is going to change that even more imminently, right? With the ability to find things intelligently that we just haven't been able to do before. So we all put them in multiple hundreds of channels. So I think there will be a lingering legacy audience for the bundles that you discuss around Charter and what have you. But I think it's going to shift, and I think television is not going to go away. The big screen won't go away, but it's shifting how it's being used in the audience and how to get them there, and mostly how to get them there.
Yeah. Interesting to me because sort of tucked into what you were talking about is will AI transform things like fast, right? So fast is, oh, I want to just watch Dick Wolf procedurals because it comforts me.
Right.
Or The Simpsons for 24 hours straight because I can do that for the rest of time, apparently, before they actually repeat a single episode. But AI could transform all that. You don't need 4,000 fast channels when all of a sudden you can say to AI, build me a fast channel tonight because I feel like Dick Wolf procedurals intermixed with, Simpsons House of Horrors or whatever, Tree House of Horrors. You can imagine that, but I don't think anybody's ready for that. Brian, are you guys doing that yet?
No, but there's been lots of conversations around that, and I completely agree. AI has to support. Everyone says there's already too many fast channels, and for sure there's a lot of fast channels, but using AI to support discovery is going to make a big difference. And to support discovery, you need a lot of fast channels and you need a lot of content because, I love the idea of a personalized fast channel. Like I spoke on a panel at Stream TV in Denver a couple of years ago saying I'd love to have a TikTok like fast channel on my TV screen that I'm just bored watching something. Let's move on to the next thing. And
right, swipe. Yeah.
Well, exactly. But for that to work, you need to pull from an enormous reservoir of channels and content. So you need the big pool. So yeah, like AI, I think one of the biggest issues around fast today is discovery. And I think once they solve for that, more and more channels will be welcome in my view. And it's a real opportunity for smaller content owners and to get onto the TV screen. And there's a role to play for them there.
I agree with Brian. I don't think channels are going to go away. I think that, limiting them to 200, 300, whatever will completely shift to you can have thousands and thousands of channels. There's got to be an interim where the people that are curating the channels are curating the content and getting, maybe someday it'll just be one big reservoir of content that anyone can plug into. But in the meantime, we've got to get there. And I think the channel curation is the way to do that. But AI will shift. You will no longer have to scroll through hundreds or thousands. You'll be able to, through your behavior, have it sent to you. And so I think there'll be hundreds and turn to thousands of channels. But get a lot more shallow who's watching anyone at any given time based on AI selection.
Oh yeah,
there are over 100 million channels on YouTube, so I think fast is a ways to go.
Oops, it's 112 million just in the last 5 minutes since you started talking. So this is interesting though. So a TikTok, because TikTok may get banned. I think this is mostly going to, we'll see what happens under Trump. That the timing on the ban is probably going to get pushed into the Trump administration because it takes effect the day before Trump takes office. And I suspect Biden will push it down the road 90 days as the law allows and say, hey, have fun with the kids. So, but maybe TikTok becomes the longer form version of our cable EPG. It's sort of interesting to think about how we might go there. But more importantly, what TikTok has been so brilliant about that TV interfaces have not been able to crack, and perhaps it's because it is longer form, is the decrypting intent, right? The viewer's intent, what the viewer likes. You don't need to know a lot. You just need to know what they're reacting to and say, okay, they did this, they like this, they just skipped that, they did this on this, they put a comment on that one. So each of those adds up to more of this and less of that, right? So nobody's really, is anybody doing that you guys see out there in any of the interfaces at this point, Jonathon?
Yeah, I think Whirl's making a noble attempt to do that with their Whirl bits, right? So they're taking long form content and they're automating the editing down of it into short form bits that people can digest, and then they're through machine learning watching what people are doing and giving them more. So for example, we're supplying them with a lot of comedy content. We have the Wits comedy channel through our partners in New York. They can take the whole episode and send you there based on you've been watching little, mini bits for minutes, hours, days. And so it's a discovery mechanism for long form, but it's also a way of taking long form and cutting it into short form, in the way that you might say TikTok does, although TikTok is a bunch of individual and it's completely, social media, it's different. But I think that they're making an attempt to do that based on behavior and social.
Oh, what are you seeing out there? And your site was, you said Majestic? Is that the name of the
Manifest TV? Yeah.
Now,
So
that sounds like a certain famous director.
Find and Body.
Yeah.
So in our world, actually, we're a lot of our programming is short form, and in somewhat sense, it's in various different vignettes too, of episodic, short form, I guess the equivalent of PSA bumper. So we play in all that dynamic in space.
Right.
We've been, I'll say, evaluating TikTok. The thing about TikTok is, keep in mind, you're stuck with the vertical resolution, right? And that certain people like that, certain people don't. But if you're used to the broader stream wide or in the cable setting, they're not doing that yet. So that's gonna how to make that transition and tackle that aspect for that viewership.
Sure.
But it is something that I think, we're keen on it just because of the nature of our programming aligns well with those short bursts, the bite size, the consumables is what we kind of call it.
Mm.
And then what we've been spending another focus on is looking at habits during the day from our viewers, when they're watching, for how long they're watching, and trying to gauge on what type of programming is resonating the best as well with them.
Yeah. Now, Brian, I guess one of the things I don't want to get lost here, though, is less about TikTok going long form than the TikTok approach of finding intent and interest and engagement. And it's tougher with long form because you're in for half an hour, or 2 hours, or, if it's a Ridley Scott Napoleon bio, you're in for the next month. So is that approach, though, doable? Something like that doable as you know more about your customer?
It remains to be seen, I suppose. I just, when I refer to TikTok, it was more the experience, not necessarily short form. This is personalized experience, and I can start watching something.
Right, exactly.
And then we have a customer, like, we're also working with Whirl on their TV Bits product, but we also have a customer down in Australia called Lead Story, and they have a news channel. I think it's distributed by Amagi, and it's called Your News, and it's literally a personalized news, and they're pulling news from multiple sources as well. So I just think there's lots of interesting innovations around this kind of personalization, and I think that's just going to innovate more, and AI is going to drive a lot of that.
Yeah.
I just, like, I have a 16-year-old daughter at home, and
my condolences. I just want to I hope you survive. I'm pretty sure she will, but I hope you survive, sir. So
she's my market research. I just watch how she consumes things. It's extraordinary. Like, it's like on the devices, the shows, the programming, the apps. It's just I'm gonna write a thesis on it someday. It's very different to what I did as a 16-year-old in rural west of Ireland. I'll tell you that much.
Right. Yeah. You roll it back, 30, 40 years ago. Holy crap. Would I have ever made it out of, name the place, small town, in my case, in Midwest or the Northeast, would I have ever made it to anything if I had YouTube in front of my face and I was staring slack-jawed at it for hours at a time, every day, I'd probably still be, I don't know, a landscaper on Cape Cod or something. Thank God I didn't have it. But now I want to shift a little bit. We've had an interesting set of stuff going on. Fubo got some new friends, a bunch of attorneys general, 16 states, plus Department of Justice, at least this week. We'll see how it goes in a month. In its lawsuit against Venu, which is the sports-focused skinny bundle that Fox, Warner Brothers, and Disney wanted to roll out. The judge issued an injunction back in September. And, oh, by the way, just sort of mentioned in passing, I'm not so sure, she said, that any cable bundle that's mandated by these individual media companies could pass muster in the Sherman Antitrust Act. And if I saw that and was counsel for one of these companies, I'd say, let's not kick that hornet's nest and completely kill off what's left of the cable business. Maybe we just kill off Venu and go get that ESPN app launched. Any thoughts about whether Venu will ever see the light of day? And the whole business of cable bundling, the thing that's a bundle now, I think, is a different thing, right? Jonathon, kick at this.
Yeah. It's an interesting twist, to be sure. And I think that I don't think bundling will go away as a concept, as a marketing strategy. But I do think that AI by itself can change all that. And when you are contending now in a bigger world of the Fubos and Fox and ESPN and everyone else is losing their leverage as cable monopolies, that it does change things, and as evidenced by the legislation of late. So yeah, I think it's not about do bundles go away, but it's about how do we fit together? How do we create an environment that makes discovery easier and gets our content out there without necessarily trying to take over the world? Because the audience doesn't want that, let alone legislation.
Right. Kyle, I'd love to hear your thoughts real quick on this, and then Brian, I'd love to get the European view. So, Kyle, what's your thought on does Venu ever see the light of day, for instance, and what's a bundle going to look like in the future?
I think Venu is going to have a hard time. I think there's a lot of focus on competition and we'll say, antitrust and also monopolies, and who could basically corner certain markets and segments and having control. As we know, whoever's got the dollars to throw at it and the army of litigators and been able to take that charge can probably come out if they really want to in the end of the day. I don't want to say doom and gloom, but look, I know Walmart is something we may be talking about, but there's a great example right there, with the acquisition of Vizio. And again, I go back to Comcast.
And they offer Paramount Plus with their bundle, right? So
correct.
I think they've added a couple of others, AMC or somebody. I can't remember.
Correct. Yeah. So it to me, I think it's really a power position play of really gatekeeping and then saying what bundles and how those bundles are going to go out to a consumer base is the position, right? And for again going to Comcast, they're in that. Really, I think they're looking, we're a service provider, i.e. internet tech. That's really, and we control that gate. So somebody has to have internet in order to access stuff. So guess what? Unless you're going to bring it over your phone or mobile device, right? So I think in the way they're probably looking at this is how do we control the narrative and still have our piece of the pie in being in this space where we know our legacy business are spinning off, right? On the Fubo side specifically, yeah, I mean, it's hard to watch an indie, which they built a great sports platform. You know, I know one of their senior members over there who's one of the founders, and I got kind of see it go through its various different iterations, and yeah, to have somebody come in that could easily, you know, cut their knees off, that's a hard thing to take. And so, if you ask me, I don't think they're going to really see that light of day. I think it's going to be really hard, and if they do, it'll be heavily restricted on what they can and can't do as much.
Right. Have to offer the same deal to Fubo or Google TV,
Correct.
YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Brian, in Europe, obviously, the EU much more aggressive even than Lena Khan at the FTC about competitive disadvantages, monopoly power, et cetera, et cetera. B, totally different, as you previously mentioned, totally different structures. What is a bundle, whether it's delivered by cable or over the internet, over mobile, fixed wireless, whatever? What does a bundle look like in the future in Europe?
Probably not dissimilar to the US. I mean, all the big staples, like you'll have Netflix bundled in with your Wi-Fi and your broadband, and I honestly don't see it being massively different, other than, you know, tailored for each unique market, in whether it's all the big European markets, Germany, France, Spain, etc. I suppose most of our business is in the US, so I can't speak to the European market with much.
You're sitting in the middle of the North Atlantic for a reason, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a bundle that I thought was interesting that sort of was announced, with Disney finally putting an ESPN tile on the interface of Disney Plus. It's like they wanted to keep Disney Plus pristine for the kids. You're getting family friendly stuff. You're not getting Pat McAfee cussing out stuff. You're not getting FX/Hulu shows with like multiple serial killers this week and da da da. It's just Marvel, where they may disappear, but they don't have any blood, or it's Bluey. Now they're going to have the ESPN tile. They've got a Hulu tile they put on earlier this year. Is this the precursor to full one app to rule them all for Disney? Any thoughts, guys?
I think, yeah. I think they're, again, positioning as a provider with the brand, right? And I'm not surprised that it went that way. I think it's how can we cover our mass audience? And yes, we got the kids, the family segment, but also parents, when the kids go to bed, probably want to watch something more suited for them, right? So
hey, how many times can you watch Bluey in a day before you?
Yeah, yeah, you know. And I was surprised that over Thanksgiving, when I was in there, I was looking, it was like Aliens. You know, they had something, the OGs were sitting there.
A well-known family film, Aliens. You know,
yeah, really.
It's about a mother alien and her children bursting forth from a mobile egg carrier, right?
Yeah.
And
that's right.
Circle of life, right?
Yeah, circle of life, total Mufasa moment there. You know, how could Disney pass on that? So,
well, it just that's the point. As I think that, you know, it's clear that the original intent, sure, but now the game has changed, where they're looking at, we are the gateway, we're the brand, but we need to serve up our audience as wide as we can and make sure that we're keeping them in our space.
Yeah.
I think it's a little.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I think it's a little more than that too. I mean, look at the NBA numbers are down. Pre-Taylor Swift, the NFL was not being watched as much as it was before. And so how are you going to get ESPN interest if you're not going after the young and the families and you know, becoming the end all destination. I don't know if they will be, but headed in that direction, absolutely, and probably good reason.
This week, speaking of trying to get the kids involved, ABC/ESPN had not just the football game on Monday night, but they had the Simpsons cast on an alternate. I think it was on ESPN. I can't remember. It was ESPN. It was the main game on one, and then they had the Simpsons on I think online or something like that, and it was overlaid cartoon football, the game, slightly delayed, but overlaid with cartoon characters. I thought it was amusing. I'm trying to figure out who the audience is other than the novelty factor, but this is only one of a number of sort of alt casts that have been going on with sports. Brian, can you imagine Bart Simpson as the striker for I don't know, Celtic United? I'm just saying.
Yes. Let's try all these things.
Yeah.
Rugby's my big sport, so I'd love to see Bart running around the rugby field. That would be fun.
Well, he's exactly what I guess they call him the halfback. Like I remember years and years and years ago, when my first gig, I had a guy that had gone to the same university I had been an offensive tackle for the football team and was gigantic. I'm no Tinkerbell, but he was gigantic. And Mike, after he graduated, was a copy editor during the day, but played rugby. And he said, yeah, there's two kinds of guys. There's little guys who run like hell, and there's big guys trying to mash them into the ground. That sounds like Homer and Bart to me.
Exactly, yeah.
But
add in and Ted Lasso, and now you've got everything integrated together.
Big soupçon, to use the French word, of cultural influences. But I did find that interesting, these all casts and sort of repurposing existing premium content in different ways. Are there other places, if you sit there and kick at it, are there other ways you could do stuff besides putting the Simpsons on the NFL? I mean, those are two of the biggest brands in media, really. But how else might this stuff play out? Any brainstorming among you guys? I'm just intrigued by it.
I don't know if this applies or not, but we have a channel called Trailers from Hell, and Trailers from Hell takes a lot of very famous film directors, talent, etc., and has them talk about their favorite film. Maybe they're playing the trailer of that favorite film at the time, or even maybe it's their film. But what we're doing is it takes what has been and makes it present through the form of conversation around the trailer, and
the hell,
a ton of viewership for that.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, and I totally get it. That sort of shoulder content around things, that totally makes sense. I'm just trying to figure out where the hell is. It doesn't sound very hellish. It sounds rather, at least in perdition.
I think they started with a lot of the darker films and horror and that sort of thing. I think that's where it came out of originally.
Well, you couldn't have run out of horror films. There's like literally 1,200 new horror films released every year. Literally 1,200. There's a study that came out in October. That's a lot of that's a lot of trailers. This does bring me to another interesting bit tied to one of our OTT.X's most esteemed members, Cineverse. Eric and the gang over there had a little movie called Terrifier 3. It came out in the fall. Improbably, it cost, I think, $500,000 to make, and they were splurging, and $1 million to market, or maybe it was the other way around, but not very much either way. And it ended up raking in $19 million at the domestic box office in its first week, and beat the second week of a very bad Joker sequel. So sequel versus sequel, but this little tiny film, they probably had a higher cell phone budget for the Joker movie than they cost to make Terrifier 3. But in talking with Chris McGurk, the chairman and CEO of Cineverse, my old boss at MGM back in the day, he said, we're able to take, they have a streaming channel called Screenbox, and they market it over there. And Terrifier 2 and the original Terrifier had done well on there. They had, the film was originally found by a website that they'd gotten control of called Bloody Disgusting, and turned those guys into talent scouts for some of these products. And they're just cross promote onto social and all that. And they spent nickels compared to the $100 bills that get lit before every big, Marvel or whatever film or DC film. Are there lessons here for what you guys do, and how do you take those and do stuff with them?
Yeah,
absolutely. I worked with Bloody Disgusting before Cineverse bought them, and created. I was working with Pluto at the time as a consultant, and we created a horror week during October where Bloody Disgusting and Fangoria and others sponsored Pluto content, horror content, and the influencers were basically driving their audiences to the content because they never could before, and then Pluto was using the influencers to create, repeat traffic, which had never happened before. We doubled the viewership and doubled the view time. So Eric's brilliant in utilizing that right now, and I think the brilliance. It is specifically or especially applies to horror because it's a very avid audience, but there are avid audiences for a lot of content. And if you can get the audience to do the work for you in terms of promoting, and feeling like they own the content so they can tell their friends and so on. And then I think even what's ahead is even doing that in a bigger way with live chat and a lot of technologies that are available and just underutilized at this point. I think that's the lesson here.
Okay.
I agree with that. I also think it's a great case study on seeing how you can take an IP and cultivate that to be repeatable. And I think the thing they did so brilliantly is they kept the cost low, and they didn't sacrifice the product. And I think that comes in with really good writing, good DPs, good sound, you putting your money where you need to be strategic in. Granted, it's a little bit easier when you have a horror title because you don't need big name casts more often than not.
Killing half of them anyway, so
exactly, you're gonna whack them up. But the idea is, you had somebody behind a mask, right? So even better. But as long as that person can really carry that character forward.
Okay.
For me, being a diehard independent here, and yes, I did go to my undergrad at film school. Okay. So
Which one?
Ithaca.
Is that a film school or an ice school?
Ice. We do have great ice wine, but yeah, no, they're
great ice wine up there. No doubt about it. Yeah, because the ice comes in around late August. But anyway,
correct.
But this is a thing, right? So you guys can do this.
Well, I think it, for let's say any filmmakers, budding filmmakers listening, is take cues from that. Be smart about your budget. Look where you're putting your financing in, your allocation in. Get a good solid script, good base, and if you can make it, look at that. 519 million off of domestic. That any investor would be jumping up and down on the multiple on that.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing we have struggled with over the past year is, projects coming in on the IP side that need funding that are frankly ridiculous. And when you ask them, someone came in with 30 million on a sports movie, and I'm like, what? With who? You ask them, show me the breakdowns.
Are Messi and LeBron in it? Or, I mean, come on.
No. The reality is it was ego-driven, all top-line heavy, unjustified, and just stupid spending.
Yeah.
And I think we need to get back.
It sounds like every Hollywood project ever, but that's just me. So now, Brian.
Great brand. Great IP.
Great. Okay. So, Brian, how are you doing some of this stuff?
Well, so we've a couple of owned and operated fast channels. We're about to launch a fourth one, and we also recently launched a managed service for other people's fast channels. We find there's a lot of fast channels in the market that they're underperforming, or the owners, the operators are they're a bit overwhelmed in that there's so many component parts to it, from scheduling to licensing to distribution to monetization, etc. And we have all of those things in house, so we can help with that. And then, kind of to your question, we're really looking at where are their gaps, where are their niches. Like to that point with Cineverse, I think it's really about like tapping into fandoms, into niche audiences, like highly engaged audience. I would prefer to have a channel with a lower number of HOVs, but insane session times, and highly engaged users, than like a gazillion HOVs with the average session time is 2 minutes. So because you can get them sponsored, they're like hyper engaged, and the advertising opportunities around that are enormous. And I think again, similar, you can bring those that fandom is driving audiences to the channel through their social, etc., etc. So like that's kind of where we're trying to put our time and effort into.
Sure. Now we're coming toward the end of our time together here in the holiday season. I have a couple of questions. One is there a story that's been going on that's caught your eye that you guys want to each talk about? There's a little chance, just a minute, about why some story, and it doesn't have to be about streaming, but anything that has caught your eye that you'd like to share. Kyle?
For me, is probably the Walmart Vizio. That's the one that I've been kind of paying attention to. And really, I'll be keen to see if as the industry, we empower the 800-pound gorilla even more now with controlling hardware and the advertising segment, and what they really can dictate with that too. So that's some area that I'm kind of following.
Oh, they're absolutely an 800-pound now. Apparently, they're going to be putting on some weight. But that only puts them on par, more or less, with Amazon, right? I mean, it's really keeping up or catching up to what Amazon's been doing with Fire TVs for a while.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, they're in lots more places, but I think they both have over 1 million employees and globe girdling reach and hands and all kinds of stuff. But it is an interesting thing to see what happens with Vizio, which leads the business in at least some sizes of TVs, is the number one seller in the United States. Brian, what's catching your eye these days? Any story that we didn't get into that is interesting or
the Ventura and the Trade Desk's OS, I mean, fascinating, and where that goes, and it's a pretty competitive space, and it kind of, they lose their independence as being the independent buyer of inventory when they operating the system. So I'm intrigued about that.
That's a really interesting point that I hadn't processed very heavily, is that they're no longer Switzerland. They're no longer handling everybody's stuff, because now they have skin in this too. Yeah. And it's a tough business, as you mentioned in passing. I mean, everybody's wanting to get an OS, and I understand why they would like one, but it's like, maybe that's not your core competency. So I'll be interested to see whether that, net hurts them more than helps them, right? So fascinating. Yeah. Jonathon, what's on your table?
Yeah, I have to say it's the Walmart Vizio acquisition, and I look at it from multiple angles. It's not just a new Amazon like competitor, but I think it's shifting the advertising universe as well, because Walmart is in store, and when you are a supplier of product in store, you have to buy co-op advertising, you have to put up signage, you are required to do a number of things that now that those aisles are extending into a television set and the home screen of Vizio. So, which, by the way, has been very sophisticated in its approach to measuring and providing and targeting. So I think that it's a major shift that's a little bit different even than Amazon's. It's expanded, brick and mortar into the digital universe.
And certainly the Vizio folks have been major supporters of OTT.X over the last several years. I've done several panels with Catherine and some of the other executives there and stories. So it'll be interesting. As you say, they have their own unit that's focused on data from the screen. And I think they were some of the first to kind of go, hey, this data thing, it could be big someday. We should keep
right.
this like what people are actually watching, not just what they scribble down in a Nielsen, diary, watch diary or whatever. So you're right. Dumping that data into the world's biggest physical retailer might be interesting.
It also uses a lot of data, and they've done it in a way that has been, approvable because people give their permission. So, so I think that's huge.
Should be really interesting, particularly as we're now seeing, Amazon, for instance, is putting those click here and we'll have it in, your account. This thing, if you want to buy it, just click with the OK button,
Right.
Like it's going to be hard to do that when you also control hardware from Walmart's standpoint too, right? So,
Right.
And finally, the lightning round. It's the season. 'Tis the season. What's your favorite holiday movie or show? Kyle.
I am a fan of the OG 1984, the Santa Claus movie that had Dudley Moore starring in it and John Lithgow when they were back in the day. That's, just a nostalgia thing. It's very,
Well, nostalgia, it counts. That's worth a lot. I mean, I think some people still like Frosty the Snowman because, stop motion animation from 1963 with Burl Ives just evokes a warm, cuddly, hot cocoa by the fireplace kind of sensibility. Brian, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, since I've been a kid, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Oh,
There you go.
love it.
I don't necessarily think of that as particularly. I mean, it's a little bit like Die Hard, right? It's been passing, but it's about Oompa Loompas and
But it's just something I watched every Christmas as a kid. Always, it was always on every single year. So yeah, actually, I saw it on TV the other evening. There you go.
It left you in a world of imagination, no doubt. So, Jonathon, you.
Family Man with Nicolas Cage. I've watched that movie
Oh, good.
multiple times. Love it. He does so well in it. Yeah, no, that's my go-to on the holidays. I mean, of course, It's a Wonderful Life, and I'll still watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer with my kids, but Family Man, that gets me every time. I still tear up.
Now that you have a family, it may be even more so, right?
Exactly.
All of a sudden, it's like, oh, I'm a family man.
That's right. Oh, okay. No, I guess it's better to be with the kids than it would have been if only.
Yeah, exactly.
David, I'll have to ask, the picture behind you is from where?
It's the Gulfo Tugurio near Portofino in Italy, in a town called Rapallo, where we stayed a couple months ago, and that is sunrise. And Rapallo is down mostly. So
I think the OTTX summit should be somewhere near that next year, rather than the Turbo Center.
I second the motion.
Parlo Italiano. I'll be happy to translate for anyone.
Let me just say, from where we were there, we went down to Tuscany and then over to Florence, where Mike Forehouse, who was going to be on this panel, invited us to this year's Tech-Talia conference, which was spectacular, in Florence, in the actually the provincial president's headquarters across the cobblestones from the Duomo, the gigantic Florence cathedral. And it was actually in that, like their local White House, right? It was a former rich bastard's palazzo. But it was fantastic, and it has there was some really interesting stuff. Like it opened with an art historian talking about Renaissance Italy and trying to make sure that we keep humanity within, as we build out AI, as we create all this stuff to keep humanity. But he pointed out that in 500 years ago, it was a largely very low rates of reading among the populace. It was a very visual society, and now we're back to that. And they had some really interesting perspectives about perspective and about how we tell stories and the ways we tell stories in a visual manner and how it's going to change. And so that would be a fine place for OTT.X. They are going to be doing something that's not quite Italy, but very close to fake Venetian canals in Las Vegas next month. OTT.X will sponsor a live buzz for those who are at CES. My condolences to all of you. Jose offered me the opportunity to do it, but I'm generally CES shy these days. It's just not my idea of a great time. So, but with that, those of you who will
You're the only one that doesn't go.
I might be the only one that doesn't go, but I watch from afar. I don't get any bugs from far-flung regions, and I get all the details. But have a great time for your holidays, everybody. Have a fantastic time at CES. Do try to attend the breakfast January 7th. Eric, you guys have a new CEO.
Yeah.
Welcome to Holly Choi.
We do. Yes.
Everybody.
Thanks so much for the call out about our event in fabulous Las Vegas. We can't lure you in, David. You're going to be
Well, you want to put
gallivanting around the world.
up in the Venetian Walk, all right? Then we'll go from there.
They've got a lot of great stuff there. They have a Statue of Liberty. They got an Eiffel Tower. I mean, come on.
It's possible. I've been there. And in fact, I would say if you want to have some good French food, there's actually the guy who's the executive chef of the restaurant at the base of the Paris Hotel's Eiffel Tower. I used to work with his wife, and he's a very good chef. And it's a very good place to eat. And you can look at the fountain across the street and all that. That's just a pro tip for your Vegas adventure.
No, they do. They have a lot of great. They've got like the Statue of David. It's bigger than the one they have in Italy. I mean, honestly, why would anybody want to go to Italy? Vegas has got it all. Not just that too.
Vegas.
They also have the OTTX members only breakfast in Las Vegas, as David mentioned, where you can I guess have a chance to connect with the movers and shakers of the industry, tune into a live episode of The Buzz, catch up on some of the latest industry research, and fuel up on a nutritious breakfast, all before most folks have staggered into the hotel lobby and waited through that long Starbucks line for their coffee. So we'd love to see you there if you're in Las Vegas for the fabulous CES show. It is a members only event, so you'll want to make sure that you're a member. If you're not a member, we'd love to talk to you about that. We've still got some fabulous deals that we'd love to.
It'd be a great present. It'd be a great holiday present to give you a membership and
yeah, we'll wrap it up and everything. We'll put a bow on it, whatever you like. It could be a Hanukkah thing or a Christmas thing, whatever you like. You're just full of great suggestions today, David. Thank you so much. But I want to make sure to thank David, Jonathon, Brian, Kyle for that deep dive into the always enticing and generally murky waters of OTT streaming. Cool session today. Thanks a lot, everybody, for being a part of that. And thank you to our dear audience for once again joining us and supporting OTTX this year and in years past. We have a fantastic year ahead. You can check out some of the stuff we're doing on our calendar out there. And as David mentioned, we have a new president and CEO, Holly Choi, who we will be introducing live in person and in living color in Las Vegas. So that's another reason to head down there and be a part of what we're doing there. That concludes today's episode of the OTTX Buzz. We're looking forward to seeing you at upcoming events next year in 2025. Happy holidays, everyone. Happy New Year's and happy streaming. Everybody, have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Yeah.